Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, cool. So, I wasn't super in the mood to make videos today, so I just got this one video to make. Yeah, I appreciate everybody stopping by, taking a look at the video. We still have the tournament going on. They just got done with the third day. So we have some guys going into the finals. Wesley so was one of those guys. So I'll be making some more videos during the. Let me see here. Get back up during the knockout rounds and stuff like that when they come back on with that. But I have the Wesley So game versus Nils Grandelius. As you guys know, I changed the layout here. So Wesley So's white, Grandelius is black. I'm always gonna have that right there. I'm not always gonna announce who's white and who's black. It's just right there. Grandelius' name is long, so it looks kind of small. But anyway. All of my people from the Philippines, it is currently 10:42 a.m. So magandang umaga, maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Mabuhay to you guys. Appreciate it very much for all the support for people that have been watching me for a long time. Kind of have my bag, always talking to me back and forth and stuff like that. Build some pretty good relationships. Anybody that's coming from Sweden, little Swedish for you. Aloha. And attack. It's pretty much almost identical to Dutch and also Norwegian. Those are like pretty similar languages. They're all like North or West Germanic languages and stuff like that. So if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have for this game. All right, cool. So we have d4. We got knight to f6. We got c4. We got g6, knight to c3, and we have d5. So we have the Grunfeld. This is something that we come into in this move order. Also something we can see would be actually d6. We see e4, bishop to g7, knight to f3 type stuff. So we get into like a King's Indian type situation. But we do have d5. So we have the Grunfeld. So there's so many different options you can play in this position. I mean, there's knight to f3s. You know, there's just taking here, the exchange. In rarer lines, you see like queen to b3. You can simply just protect and just make sure that you have the bishop open and stuff like that by pushing e3. Bishop to g5 type stuff like that. So many different options. But we do see pawn takes d5 by So. We see knight takes d5, and then that gives us the ability to play e4. And after a few moves, knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, bishop to g7, we got knight to f3. And as you guys can see, you know, white has a very, very beautiful pawn center. And that is kind of one of the things that's a little bit wrong. The Grunfeld is a solid opening, but it does give white quite a bit as far as like central control and space and stuff like that. You know, this isn't ideal for black to allow white to have all of this space and piece movability. You know, you literally have the ability to just get all of your pieces on beautiful squares. It just becomes like really, really beautiful for white. So you definitely have clear advantages as white by playing against the Grunfeld. And as you guys know, we're looking at c5 coming. As you guys know, basically when you're looking at somebody that has a really, really good pawn center, you're going to be trying to break with c5 or f5. f5 doesn't really make any sense in this position because it does open your king. You don't want your king to be exposed. So c5 is the most logical response. The most logical move. We see rook to b1. Of course, we're not worrying about trades because the pawn will just take back and, you just have like a super, super beautiful pawn center just like you did before. So that's kind of where c3 really comes into play. Moving that. Sometimes when you see like the Sicilians and stuff like that, you'll see c3 and after d4, you can try to take back with the wing pawn. So like I said, we have rook to b1. We have castles by black. We got bishop to e2. We got b6 by black. We have castles. We got queen to c7, and then we see rook to e1. And as natural as this move looks, this is the novelty of the game. It's a very simple thing. You're trying to get this rook on a soon to be possibly open file. You're trying to like support this e4 pawn here. So it's a very like principled move. So I was actually really surprised when I discovered that this was a novelty. And this, just 11 moves deep into a Grunfeld because, Grunfeld is really, really heavily played. So we see knight to c6. And then, you have a decision to make. Do you want to allow the trades here? Which bishop to e3 is actually a very legitimate response. But we do see d5, and that kind of forces the knight either to like a whack square or to a more central square. And so we see knight to e5 and we have c4. Which is, very solid. As I was saying before, this is a really, really beautiful structure for white. So black hasn't really done like, much in the way of like, forcing, white to give any concessions as far as like their space is concerned. They're controlling a lot of squares in the enemy territory. This rook is on a half open file. So, you really kind of have what you want out of the opening as white. So we have f5. We are castled, so we do have the ability to move king to b8. So it's not that bad of a situation that you're opening your king. But, like I was saying before, I mean, c5 has already been played, so that's already out. So f5 is really kind of like your only try. I mean, you can try to push e6, but you can't really trade because then you're going to be given, you're going to be giving white a protected pass pawn. So you don't want to do that. So we see pawn taking f5, bishop taking f5. We see rook lift to b3. So we got rook a to d8. And then we have bishop to b2. And as you guys can see, we have a lot of activity from white, with the bishops going over here. This bishop has the ability to move and start to influence the king's position. This knight is, legitimately in a good spot to be able to try to, do something like that. You have this rook that has the ability to swing over, stuff like that. This queen is, so it's just a really, really solid position for white. And so we have e6 by black. And so like when you run out of c5, you run out of f5, e6 is pretty much the only thing you have to do. But the thing about it is, like, if you do see a trade here, you'll see a trade here, and then you just have a completely passed pawn. So, it's a really nice situation for white. So if you want to go ahead and stop the video here and see how Wesley how he defends this particular scenario as far as the e6 pawn coming, because you don't have the ability to really push the pawn because it's double protected here. So it takes some finesse in the position. So like I said, if you want to go ahead and pause it and see if you can guess what a really, really good solid move in this position is, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So it requires you to actually kind of calculate a couple moves deep. There's a lot of interest in this bishop here. But basically what you're wanting to try to do is you're wanting to try to deflect this queen away from the defense of this pawn. You're trying to target this pawn back here. So if you found the move knight takes e5, you would be absolutely correct because you are snapping a piece off the board. So, black is almost obliged to take back. So we see bishop taking e5, bishop taking e5, and then after the queen takes e5, you discover an attack on the queen with bishop to f3. So what you've been able to accomplish by this is you're protecting this square, so you're not worried about like we're not doing that. My bad. Any trades here because you're just going to take back with the pawn, and then now you have a super protected pass pawn. And like I said, you are kicking the queen away. And in the process of doing so, queen comes to f6, and then we actually trap the bishop here on f5. So this was. I'm not sure if this was like a calculation error when he realized his bishop was trapped, but he does have these pawns on light colored squares, so the bishop doesn't really have anywhere to run. So this is actually just dropping a piece in this variation. So we see b5 trying to get like some counter attack going. The pawn takes f5. We see pawn takes c4, and we have rook b to e3. We see queen takes f5, and we see d6. So as you can see, we've successfully moved this queen away from this square, and so now we're capable of pushing the pawn. And now we also have an attack set up here to take this pawn, and then we're looking to try to advance the the pawn here on the d file, and just basically put all of black's pieces in very, very defensive positions. Because what you want to do when you have a passed pawn is try to push it as far safely down the board as you can, and try to basically immobilize your opponent's pieces. So you'll see that coming to fruition here in a second. So the queen comes to f4. We see d7. We see rook to f7, and we see bishop to c6. And as you can see, you are going to be giving up this pawn here, but there's not like a super conclusion to that. So it's not like you're going to be dropping mate or anything. So you have this pawn just literally just in the throat of black. This rook is completely just passive, and that's the power of having a heavy piece like a rook or a queen behind a pass pawn, because you're going to be forcing at some point either the king to come over and be behind the pawn, or a heavy piece or a minor piece to get behind it and basically just sit there and just babysit and just blockade that pawn. So as you guys know, passed pawns can be very, very powerful. So the queen takes on f2. Like I said, you just sidestep the king to h1. You see c3. You got rook taking e6. You have c2. And usually your natural response is to actually move your queen. But we actually have an in-between move of rook to e7, rook to e8 with check. And we see king to g7. And then we see queen to a1. It is actually in this position that Grandelius does resign the game. And it is just because, like, I mean, if you go into any types of trades at all, I mean, you're just going to be pretty much be losing the game. Your probably best try to try to defend it as accurately as possible is going to be a queen to d4. Just kind of blocking, you know, that check and making it to where at least when you do see a trade like queen takes d4, you see pawn takes d4, and then, you know, you're going to be losing the rook, but you know, you kind of have the ability to get these, you know, kind of these passed pawns rolling. But, you know, you have to move the king over because, you know, you're looking at the discover check here, and then you're going to be promoting with the check. So you have to sidestep that first. And then after rook comes to c8, the rook would have to give itself up on d7. The bishop would take on d7 after d3. You can just move rook to g1. This rook is stopping this pawn, and this rook is going to be stopping, you know, this pawn once it hits here. So if you had something like that, of course, you know, you would just be promoting or whatever like that. So you just have way too many pieces by black. But yeah, that was a pretty like straightforward, you know, game by white. You know, Wesley So actually just kind of just like had a little slight advantage at the beginning, and he just kind of just built on the advantage the whole time. And then Grandelius just, you know, he just accidentally dropped a piece, which, you know, everybody does. You know, anybody that plays the game is going to drop a piece at one point. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner player, you're a world champion. You know, Garry Kasparov has a really famous game where he was playing, I think it was, he was playing Wesley So actually, and he dropped his knight. Just pushed the pawn and dropped the knight. So, you know, if you're dropping pieces, don't get discouraged. Happens to the best of them. But I appreciate you guys coming by. Maraming Salamat Po, Aking Magai Kaibagan, you know, Tack, you know, if you are coming from Sweden, I appreciate you guys coming by and stopping by very much. And I'm just not sure what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. I'll come up with some stuff. Might, you know, see what's going on in the chess tournament world. But I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I'll see you guys next time. All right.